21st. 21st September, Friday.
And we have with us
Mr. Manikis. Manikis.
Manikis.
Manikis.
Where does that come from?
Peloponneso, Greece, southern Greece. Be precise, Kopia, amalgamation of Kopia and Mulay, father and mother, who migrated here in 1956, 57 to Kuma, and built a life in that quaint little township that's had its ups and downs, the Snow Mountain scheme, then moved to Canberra in 1977.
So you were born in Kuma?
I was born in Kuma, and so were my brother and sister. I was educated in Goulburn, St Pat's College, as a boarder. Yeah, and from Kuma, yeah, boarding in Goulburn. And then when I moved to ANU in 1977, the whole family moved up in traditional Greek style to be with their eldest son and support him. Well, I thought that was the reason. I believe that to be the reason. Yeah, I'm more charitable than that. Yeah, so we've been a close-knit family since, and we've kept out of the mainstream. We're in Queanbeyan, and I remain there and raise my family in Queanbeyan. My parents are still there. I see them almost on every second, third day, communicate, and very close-knit, and out of the rough and tumble of community life, just done our own thing. And although of late, when I say late, the last 5 or 6 years, my parents have been more involved in the Queanbeyan Church with my uncle, who's the priest there, and my mother's brother, and that's their life. And for me, life goes on. Virtually a 20-hour-a-day job, 7 days a week, where I am at the moment.
So that's you do 20 hours a day then?
Oh no, I'm exaggerating. It's about 12 hours, 12, 14 hours a day. And essentially, it's not all hard slog, I might add. It's the job that I've got here is about community interface. We have 160 community groups that we look after, and then that's one part of my job, and that involves and has for the last 7, 8 years has involved getting an intimate knowledge of each particular group, gaining their trust, building working relationships with each of those community groups. And essentially, we are the face for those groups, first point of contact in government. And it's quite challenging, it's quite good fun, quite exhaustive. We only have limited resources here to do that job. Whilst we're doing that job, we've also got a task of being the key advisors to the Chief Minister on community relations, community affairs, community policy. And that involves speech writing for the Chief Minister and other ministers on a daily basis. It involves briefings, media releases, doing up functions, staging functions, on a wide range of issues from the bottom end, well not bottom end, but from one end of the spectrum. For example, the refugees that are being released out of the detention centres into the community, we're getting our fair share here in Canberra. People who arrive here, my staff give them orientation, look after them their first night here, then help them open bank accounts and all the rest of it, right through to the top end of town with planning issues or development issues and what have you. So we get involved in just tinkering on advocating for groups out there as well. So
that's migrant groups, or is that all groups, all community groups?
All community groups. All community groups. My office is called the Office of Multicultural and Community Affairs, and I have 4 directors that work for me. One is looking after Community Policy Unit, which generates policy for government at a higher level. Another one is the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Affairs Unit that looks after the Indigenous issues in Canberra. We helped in native title for Namadgi, all that sort of stuff. Then we've got the Women's Policy Unit and then the Multicultural Affairs Unit. So there's four groups within the office that covers the full range of community activities.
And how many people in each of those offices?
We've got about 30 staff here, 30 staff that work for the whole office, and it varies between the units. There's 4 to 5, 6 people in each of the units at any given time. Yeah.
So you get to meet a lot of the different ethnic community groups?
We do, and part of my job, well, one of the strategies, I've been in this position now for 15 years, and one of the strategies that I've embarked on from the beginning was to identify a level within each community group that I would work with, and they've become sort of quasi employees of the office, I suppose. It's the network that I employ here in Canberra. We use the presidents and the committee members of each of those 160 groups. So whether it's the Afghan group or the Vietnamese group or the Chinese groups that are broken up into 5 or 6 factions, although they've recently come together, or whether it's the Greeks, the Greek community, Italian community, there's 160 groups that are registered with the office, and we, on a day-to-day basis, deal with the leadership, and they are our agents in the community, and we are their agents in government. So we have this relationship that we've built up, and it's worked exceptionally well, and we enjoy a very healthy working relationship. It makes my job easier, it makes their job easier too, because they are able to talk to their membership, and these groups have members of between some groups of 30, 40, 50 members, other groups of thousands of members. So we're talking about a significant chunk of Canberra's community that are caught up in these 160 community groups or are represented. So it's a very strategic network.
So did this network evolve 15 years ago, or?
It evolved in 1996. Whilst I've been in this job for 15 years, the job has changed. And it has changed as we got self-government in 89. Now I was here in 1985. So we built up to self-government. This job evolved. We went through different governments, so I had a different focus. Under the Follett government, under the Kane government, and so forth. Now, but it was only under the Carnell government in '96 that this community, and getting right down into the community grassroots level as a strategy, came about.
So is that a political driven thing, or was that something that you drove yourself? Partly both, actually. What had happened was in 1995, when the Liberals gained government with Carnell for the first time, in their policy, the Liberal Party policy going into the election was the establishment of this office. But that was about it. So what we had to do is put some form around it, or put some flesh to the bone, and the way to make it work. So it wasn't prescriptive in the Liberal Party policy of how to make it work. But we've been here making it work, and the way we saw it, or the way I saw it working well, was if we had people out there on side and working with us, and for us to be working with them and be honest with them and try to deliver what they wanted within reason. That's very clever, isn't it?
Well, I don't know about clever, that's for others to judge, but it's worked. It's worked well, and we've delivered for the communities a range of programs that have been
copied by other states and territories since.
So it has been copied, has it?
A lot, yes, yes. A lot of our programs, whether it's our Access to Justice program, where we've put justice of the peace in each, paid for and trained up justices of the peace in each of those, community groups, so they don't have to run off to a solicitor because they can't speak English, and then the solicitor sends a bill for $100 for just witnessing a document, or So these are some of the things from my personal experience that I recall, and our National Multicultural Festival, which is another concept that came out of this office, is drawing the communities together and showcasing culture and putting the multicultural side of Canberra onto the map into the mainstream in Canberra. It's been through a rocky road lately, but it's back here now. It was with our tourism body, but it's back now with the office. So those are two examples of programs. There's a myriad of others that we've put in place. Interpreter card for those that can't speak English, they get issued. Government pays for interpreters where there's interactions over the counter between those that can't speak English and service providers. There's our work experience program, so there's people out there who are overly qualified or highly qualified or have held great positions in their former country who've come to Canberra, and they're floundering, driving taxis, are underemployed, or can't even get to an interview because they lack Australian workplace experience. We have a program that we've put in place here that runs for about 4 months. We pay for a month worth of training, and we've put through 30, 40 of these people at a time. And they go through some formal training, how we operate the culture, the workplace culture. They get an appreciation of that at one of the business colleges here. And then we put them for 8 to 12 weeks in an ACT government department to get some experience. It's not paid, but what it does at the end of that is they get some training, they get a workplace experience, they get a certificate, and they get a reference. So they're then well placed to actually apply for jobs in the open market. So that's another example of a program that we've put in place.
The early years in the job, were you just given a little desk somewhere and a token ethnic? No. The early years, like I started in the public service in 1980 in Department of Defence, and I spent 5 years there. I had a pretty rapid rise through the ranks. I never sat around waiting for things to happen, but and then I came over to what was the ACT administration, I think at the time, in August 1985, to at a pretty senior level, to run their administrative law program, and that was their freedom of information and what have you. And it was in, we didn't have self-government then, so we didn't have a Chief Minister's Department, but it was in a central agency that was under the control of the Commonwealth Government at the time. And then from there, the position was required to, I assisted with the self-government legislation in Clyde Holdings' office for a brief period of time, who was supervising the legislation to go through. I remember the establishment of the casino legislation, helping there. So I was at the forefront at all times, and then we settled down with the first ACT government. I was in a social policy branch, a public affairs branch at the time, which was this position, looking after the public relations, public information stuff. And then went into a social policy branch, where there was more effort required on the social justice side of things under a Labor government. And so I've been at reasonably senior levels throughout. It wasn't just a desk. I felt like I was contributing quite usefully to the community. I think it's very important. I think from a few dimensions. I think we owe it to the community. After all, they pay us. So I think we need to be doing justice to the community and the resources that are spent on us. That's the first point. We do that, of course, by serving the government of the day, and whilst we're not directly accountable to the community as public servants for our efforts, we certainly are accountable to the government of the day, who in turn are accountable every 3 years to the community at election time. So in a weird way, in a very complex way, we are accountable. Again, you know, I think the ACT government and the experience I've had here has been, because we're such a small jurisdiction, it's interesting that, you know, we're only the size, the whole ACT public service is only the size of a medium Commonwealth department in terms of numbers. So when you take all our firefighters, all our firefighters, our teachers, our hospital workers, our public servants that sit behind desks, you know, you put all that together, you know, we're only the size of a medium Commonwealth department. So what does that do? That's great job satisfaction for us, because the microscope's on you, and the more senior you get, the more wider the range of your responsibilities become. And it makes it very interesting. I know a lot of people who leave the ACT Public Service to hop into the bigger pool, which is the Commonwealth, find that they are sort of restricted to a you know, very narrow set of duties, and it makes life a bit boring, I guess. But here it's never boring.
So is that part of the reason why you... Can I switch that up?
Yeah, certainly.
Is that part of the reason why you shifted from a big department to a little...
Yeah.
Just so that you can measure your own contribution?
Yeah, also the type of work. It's also about... I had a desire to sort of serve the community at a more closer interface. You know, I like the idea of being interact with the community, whereas up in defence it was just you're in this lamonge of bureaucracy. You knew who your boss was, and you knew who your staff were, and that's it. I mean, and that, you know, your desk tied, and whereas, yeah, I needed to get out somewhere where your efforts, you know, you can really tell if you're doing a good job, and you can assess that yourself rather than, and obviously you get told if you're not, but it's important to me that I can serve the community more directly.
And how do you measure that within yourself?
Within myself.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the feedback. It's the feedback one receives. You know, and it's not always good. It's not always good, and it's the feedback you receive directly, and the feedback you receive indirectly. And in a place like Canberra, such a small town, and the network's so intense that you get your feedback very, very quickly and very pointed. And that's very good, actually, even if it's criticism, because then you can adjust your stand, or you can adjust your program, or you can adjust the way you behave, and survive, I guess.
The Greek community give you active feedback?
They do. They do. I have the Greek community is a wonderful community here in Canberra. It's yeah, it is. It's truly a wonderful community, and there's some real characters. Some real characters. In this room here, I have on a regular basis people, you know, 50, 60, 70 years old, who come in and have coffee with me on a regular basis. I interact with the professionals around town on a regular basis. The property developers, the solicitors, you name it. One way or another, I guess on a weekly basis, I'll come across a range of people with Greek background, different professions. Greeks in this town are very creative, gung-ho, and very much on the front foot. And I'll probably get to hear or participate, not so much participate, but certainly get to hear most of the ideas that Greeks come up with in this town at the beginning of the process. They're pretty go-ahead people here in Canberra. Very impressed, very energetic, and it's not just the oldies, it's also the young kids. They're all into it, and yeah. In fact, there's quite a few Greeks that work in this building now, mostly females. There's a few males who are forging out careers in the public service as well. And that's something you wouldn't have seen 5, 6, 7 years ago. And I think it's just time. I think it's just a matter of time before we see more of this. But we have a very active Greek community in Canberra, and very responsive too, I might add.
Responsive.
Very responsive. Some years ago, you probably remember, I suggested to some people about doing a history of Canberra, the book. I think that's a classic example of, okay, it was one individual that drove it, but let me tell you, there was a lot of different people who got on board for that, for something like that to happen. Now, no matter what you thought of the process or whatever, one thing about Greek, they get into a result at the end of the day. At the end of the day, there was a result. There was an objective to reach, and that happens. And I think there's a few projects going around at the moment. There's the extension of the Hellenic Club. There's the church block next door. There's the school in Yarralumla that's looking to be extended. I've seen the stuff come past my desk. There's some programs within the Hellenic Club, participation in the National Multicultural Festival. We're all there. We're there, and we just need to sustain it and come up with ways, structures that ensures that all this good stuff survives. And that needs some serious thinking by the leadership in the Greek community in this town. I must say, no different to any of the other communities either, I might add, both in the problems and in the good stuff that happens. I see in the Chinese community great things. They're just building their brand new Mandarin Club, which is the equivalent to our Hellenic Club, the Chinese, up in where the old Finnish club used to be in Jamison there. They're all starting to come together to support the cause as well. And they've got their Chinese language schools, they've got their business sector up there at Dixon. They support each other, they're building an old people's home and hostel and what have you. So we have the community now really, over the last few years, really coming up right across the board. The multicultural landscape in this city is absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And there's more to come. And as far as the Greek community is concerned, I think there needs to be a little bit of an adjustment to the mindset of some of the older people towards the young people. And whilst projects like this one is very valuable and worthwhile, needs to be some mentoring, some nurturing, some new programs that someone needs to come up with to ensure that the youth understand that there's a responsibility for them to keep this whole thing going.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, I looked at the annual report for the Hellenic Club the other day, and I was heartened. It came in the mail, and I opened up, and there I looked down at the ages of the directors, and I was heartened. We had 50% of them were under the age of 30 or 35 or something, and that augurs well for the future. And I guess that's great. I think we need to decide. I think we need to decide as a community if the Hellenic Club's the focal point, or is it the Greek community and the church the focal point where where the welfare of the community in total is thought about and considered and direction set. I argue it should be the community, the proper association, the Greek community, but I think there needs to be some stronger linkages between the club, and the club will say, well, we're here as a club and we're not here just for the Greek community. Yeah, that's okay, but I think there is a strong obligation for some strategic thinking about the next 5 years or the 10 years, the next 10 years. Here in government, we've done this. We've faced this problem in government, and we've put forward some programs that are working exceptionally well, some mentoring programs, so that we can nurture youth leadership and encourage leadership by youth. Our Department of Urban Services is running those programs. And likewise, I'm trying to get some of our community groups, some of these 160 community groups, to do the same. And the Greek community is no different. How we do it in the Greek community is going to be the challenge. Whilst it looks good at the club, the directors there, that we've got the youth coming through. There's some very well qualified, some very good people there. In the community sector, I've got people, some of the older directors saying, we're doing this all on our own, we can't connect with the youth, they're not interested. How do we go about, it's floundering stuff. But I do think that there needs to be an effort made. Maybe talking to some experts in the field, or having a look at the government's program on how we've have gone about in setting up these programs, mentoring programs. Now, that's pretty foreign stuff maybe to some of the older Greek generation, where, in the village you told the young kid what to do, and if it didn't do it, they got what they affectionately called a chastuki over the ear, mate. But the world has changed, and I don't know. There is the Greek youth is very, very talented, very skilled, and I think we need to just channel that to ensure that the good things that have been left as legacies by the older generation continue after the next 10 years, when some of these movers and shakers, as life goes, may not be around.
So these strategies that have been developed, or should be developed, how do you get those up and running?
I think it's all about a concerted effort by individuals, maybe the leadership in the Greek community putting their head down. I don't want to sound too critical either. Maybe they're thinking about this now, but how you get those programs thinking, how do you get those programs going, is about sitting down and turning the collective mind of the committee or the leadership to getting it running. I mean, it's as simple as that. You sit down and you map out what you're going to do, and off you go. You look at what's being done in other areas, and then you pinpoint. You've got to be pretty proactive. You've got to pinpoint some young kids, some potential kids that have got these this leadership quality, I suppose. And off you go. How do you know who's got leadership quality? I mean, that's a good question as well. But if you pick 10 kids and 4 of them are good ones, who keep on with it, then you're winning. You're ahead.
You were involved in the 2010 thing with the Lenny Club at one stage of that weekend workshop, or that one-day workshop.
Yeah, I was.
What came out of that?
Oh, that's an interesting question, because I thought as an exercise that was absolutely fantastic, and everybody got together, and I think there was a failure in not closing the loop and reporting back to those participants. And I think one of the things we've recognised here in government a long time ago is that when you undertake consultation and you put people to the trouble of coming along and contributing ideas and what have you, One of the things we've learnt, quick smart here in government, is that you always close the loop. And what you do there is you report back, or you send back the report to each of the participants. I'm waiting, and every time I see the former president, I ask him, my report has been lost in the mail, because I have not seen a report. And a lot of people are putting their hands up that I know of and say, what's happened? What's happened? Well, I understand that from talking to some other people that some of the ideas out of that weekend are being used or have been used in the doing up the extension, and they incorporated the thoughts. But I've yet to see a document that outlines, where or what came out of that weekend. Which, while I was there, I was hearing some great stuff. I was hearing some fantastic stuff. Wide range of views, some great ideas. Participation, there's a spirit of participation there, a spirit of community. There's young people, old people, and let's not forget there was girls and boys and men and women. I mean, it was a really, dominated by males, of course, but there was still, there was different views coming from different areas and different people. But it was a shame that we lost the momentum on that when the whole thing just went into a hole, as far as I'm concerned. Now, maybe that I'm out of it, and everybody else got the results of it.
Well, it seemed to me that that was a very ambitious project, driven by one person who had been influenced by the power of that sort of thing in his professional work. But it got lost because the old people said, no, why?
Yeah.
And he lost, but okay, he had it, but it then got killed.
Yeah. And I think at what point you say ohi in a process is debatable too. And I think ohi should have said before the 30-odd thousand or whatever it was spent at the beginning of the process. And more importantly, that's only money, don't worry about that. More importantly is the expectations of the 200 people that were there were heightened, that something grander or something great was going to happen. And I think that's damaging, and I think that's where the, we talk about loss of confidence sometimes in the community. We feel like, some people feel like they've been taken for a ride. They've been used as pawns in in some game that's been played to make other people look good. It's all those sorts of things, and to bring people, to pay a consultant to come down from Queensland, to go through a process involving a great number of people, and then at the end of that, to say, thank you very much, ohi. One then looks back and says, well, hang about, what's going on here? Why? Yati. So the ohi gets responded to by yati.
Well, I don't think there was an ohi put to it. I think it was just quietly.
Yeah, just quietly.
Out or whatever it was, just not
well, I'm just using your words when you say yohi,
So
I'm not sure what happened.
So, and I think this is a problem a lot of young people will have when dealing with the older people, is they get enthusiastic and everything, and then they get cut off and they go, what's the point?
Yeah. Although my experience, and I'm talking about an older young person here, my experience has been very good. Every time I've spoken and put up ideas, whether it's the Glendy, whether it's the book, whether it's the general participation in the festival, whatever, I've had a fantastic response. Whether it's sponsoring the Cosmos, whether it's help, this, that, or the other, it's been a brilliant response. I can't recall an incident where I've had to, I've had any group of older Greek people. I've had disagreements on points of view, how we should approach things, but not totally squash any initiative. They've been very supportive, very supportive. My experience. Maybe maybe the young kids need to. It's an intergenerational thing, and I think it works both ways. I mean, I think there needs to be some respect for where and how the older people have come to, how they've been shaped by their experiences here in Australia. And I think that's very important to be recognised by the young'uns. You know, the older people didn't have the old silver spoon in the mouth when they arrived here in the 50s and 60s, or the cutlery set, as some would say, in the mouth. As the newer generation seems to have had a much easier run of it. And there's maybe some characteristics of the younger generation about impatience and not being able to work around some of the things, but rather expect, oh, this is an idea, yes, do it. Maybe it's a different way of approaching. So maybe there's some education for both sides that's required.
Here's an idea for you.
Mm-hmm.
In order to help that process, maybe, I mean, there's a wealth of information, a wealth of talent, a wealth of ideas, of experience in the older generation.
There is.
And if they could be encouraged to share that
Yes.
with the younger people,
Mm-hmm.
and not just younger Greek people, but younger people, that repository
Yep.
could be mined and utilised in all sorts of ways.
Exactly. Totally agree. And that is part of what I'm saying. It's a two-way process. And what you've just mentioned now is one way of the younger people getting an appreciation of where these people have been, how they've been shaped, or they would draw a conclusion as to how they've been shaped. You know, you're here in the 60s or 50s without a cent to your name, without a word of English. That sort of does some drastic things to you when you do get money, but you might still not be able to speak eloquent Queen's English. And it gives you a different perspective on problem solving, and even if you have money and even if you are in positions of power in relation to other people. So I think that's very useful. I think it's very useful. But what are the forums? What's the initiative, the program? Who drives it? How do you get those experiences out? Now, I know the Philippine community, the Dutch community here in Canberra, and the German community have all done oral histories. I've funded them through our grants program. We have funded those communities to do oral histories of their older people, and to make those oral histories available to whoever asks. They've also done a survey of their aged community as well, respective communities. So, you know, they've sort of recognised this, but they're doing it because of aged care needs rather than to educate their youth. So there is the capacity and the resources to do that. What it needs is someone to come in from the Greek community and say, okay, these 3 university students from our community would like to spend the next 6 months doing oral histories or doing a publication on the histories of and the experiences of those that are 55 and over or 60 and over in our Greek community, and there wouldn't be too many. It wouldn't be more than 50, 60, 100 of those people around, I don't think, who would have a lot to contribute.
I think those wisdoms that would then be passed on would be invaluable. I mean, not just the experiences, but the wisdoms that would come out of it, and would be then available to aspiring young people.
Yeah, exactly. In the International Year of the Older Person back in 95, 96, I can't remember, we had older people like that go into primary schools and talk to groups of classes about their experiences, whether it be in the war, whether it was up in the sugarcane fields, whether it was building the Snow Mountain scheme, whatever. and they were in there, but that was just, it wasn't just Greek, it wasn't Greeks, but it was just the general older people from the community to raise awareness of issues surrounding older people. But to the primary school kids, lower high school kids, I remember doing that as a program. Now, with the Greek, you do a publication, sits on a shelf, gathers dust, you know. But I think it needs to be interactive, whether it's forums on a regular basis, whether it's, you know, whether it's half an hour after the Hellenic dancers have finished dancing. You know, get all the kids together and you've got a group of kids and get a couple of Urias and Yerdos coming in and giving a presentation every second training, you know, every second dance lesson. Because I think there's about 150 of these kids there. So that's one way of capturing it. A body of Greek kids at one go, or at the school, you know, the littler kids. Yeah, so, but I think more difficult the 20 to 30-year-olds than the other groups, I think, to capture.
Or you have, or you can have lunches and speakers who speak.
Yeah.
And you start to build relationships with the younger people.
That's right.
Not unlike the rostrums and the...
Yeah, that's a good idea, a very good idea. And it's...
and they all can be filmed.
Of course, for prosperity. And it's much more trendier at lunch too. You're probably more likely to get a lot of these.
So you build up a network and
Yeah. I think the Canberra property owners, that association there, that I noticed there's a lot of the younger Greeks involved there, mostly male dominated. But it's not
exclusive, isn't it? You
pretty
know,
exclusive.
You've got to have property. Who has property?
Yeah, that's
Unless
true.
you're established from the established families.
Yes.
You know, so you're excluded otherwise.
That's true. But I'm just trying to think of another forum. I can't think of any other forum other than the Hellenic Dancers to Canberra Property, and they're pretty exclusive. I mean, for us young people that can't dance, it's we're going to miss the message, mate.
So comparing the Greek community with the other communities that you're involved with, are the Greek communities or community at the forefront?
Oh, they certainly are. They are. The Greek community is at the forefront in many ways. And I don't say that because I have Greek heritage. One of the distinguishing factors would be the fact that it's an older community. It's more integrated into the mainstream. You'll see Greeks pop up in the most unlikely places in our community. Whether it's over at ANU, whether it's in the public service, in the legal fraternity, academia, as I said, and they'll participate. You'll find them participating in almost every activity around town. So they are very well enmeshed into the community life of Canberra. They have very strong institutions here in Canberra as well, the Greeks. The two churches, the club, they have their, the Hellenic Club, the schools, their radio programs. They have 2 or 3 radio programs running. They participate in sport right across the board at both playing and administration level. I think, so generally they're very much a mature community group, very mature, very well established, and one that I think from my, going to barbecues in backyards and what have you, one that has at the same time very much retained its culture and has, I think, been successful in instilling the culture into the next generation. I think as I view talk to the 20-year-olds and 25-year-olds, whilst they all like to be trendy and what have you, and be, mainstream, and they're still very mindful of the Greekness That's very, very pleasing. And when you look at organisations like the Chinese community groups, like the Chinese community group, and the Asian community groups, they too, you'll find them members of that community group in academia and public service, but they're not as well established here. They're only now just starting to catch up, I think, if you can call it catch up, with a club and trying to get some of their infrastructure, their ethnic specific infrastructure in place. We've got an aged care facility. The Chinese are just building one now up at Aileen. They're just building their club now. But I think the Chinese are also more academically inclined, both their kids. I think they have a different, and they're more like an enclave, in terms of up at Dixon, the restaurant industry. They seem to be more keep to themselves more, certainly not as integrated as the Greeks or the Italians. I think the Italians also are the same as the Greeks. They've sort of tended to be more mainstreamed. The Croatians a bit the same as well. So the Croatians, Italians, and Greeks, European. They have some similarities. Most came here in the 50s, 60s, and are well established. They have characteristics that that. What we've tried to do over the 6 years is try to say to everybody, like, Canberrans first, and that sort of cuts away the this competition between the groups. And whilst I can say that Greeks can be very proud of where they've been and where they're going, and I can see it from my perspective, and having experience with a lot of the other community groups. I think we need to keep the effort going, and it's not really an issue about we're a better community group than another community group. We just got to sustain what we've got, and keep doing the good things that we're doing. We're not perfect. We haven't got there either. We've got an assembly that sits over there that's got no Greeks in it yet, and I'm speaking on the 21st of September with an election at the 20th of October with 4 weeks to go, but with 3 candidates that are Greek running for that election. So we may be seeing the next step in this evolution of mainstreaming, where we're seeing maybe one or two, maybe more, who knows, members of the Legislative Assembly who are of Greek heritage, which I would applaud very loudly, and I think would be a great thing for our community. Of course, the Italians have been there. They've got the mayor over in Queanbeyan, and they've had a member of the Legislative Assembly in the past, the Deputy Chief Minister, I understand. So, we don't need to compare ourselves quite yet.
Well, there's a lot of people actually in the various communities look up to the Greek community as the way to do things.
They do, and they certainly do, and I get this all the time. And one of the things about the Greekness or the Greek character is that we don't like to lose, we don't like to fail. We're very simple people. We have very simple objectives, but we damn well work hard to achieve those, and very entrepreneurial in whatever we do. Sometimes we're, like the Hellenic Club, sometimes at odds with what the intention of clubs is all about, because as Greeks we like to make sure that the business runs, it's not running at a failure, we're not going broke, it's run like a business. Yet on the other side, we know that the reason we exist is because it's supposed to be a community facility, non-profit. So how do you reconcile the Greekness of making money and entrepreneurship and what have you with this requirement that's imposed that says you must exist there not making a profit because you are a community group. So, whilst the other communities look at our, and they mostly look at the club and they look at our churches and they look at each of the individuals and they look up and they say, okay, they're great role models in our community. There are certain things that, as a Greek mind, we need to also bear in mind that we need to perhaps approach things a little bit differently in order to fit in. Now, I can talk more about that, but I won't.
I was going to say, that's fascinating.
That's the way I mean, community groups do, you're quite right. They look up, but again, we talk about values and what have you. The Chinese, I've been to China a couple of times. I'm going again in November, I hope. I find the Chinese values are identical to the Greek values. They value older people. Their kids, they'll sacrifice one generation, the well-being of one generation for the next. They'll drive their kids in an educational context. They'll drive them to excel. Money is the reason for living, virtually. Money. Health, just the simple things. These simple things that drive that generation are at the core of the values, the value system. And apart from the physical characteristics, there's not much difference. And I've been over there, I've had a look, I know how I was brought up, and there's not much difference. And I put it down to the fact that we both share ancient civilization. Now, we both have, all these things have sort of evolved. This mindset that we have today for both China and Greece comes from years and years of refinement, and how to live has been refined. And I think that's why we have a pretty good community here in Canberra. We do share those values, except because we've been here longer and we've been able to get on our feet through hard work of our parents and all the rest of it, we've been able to progress our infrastructure much quicker than, say, the Chinese. They're only catching up now.
So why are Greeks afraid of Chinese?
Greeks are afraid of Chinese. Kinesians, yeah.
They did. I mean, all Asians, and yet we share
Well, maybe
with them.
Yeah, we do, and I guess that's the answer. That is your answer. We do share a lot with them. They are pretty astute. We can't put it over them, and if you can't put something over someone, it makes life a bit difficult, doesn't it?
What's this fear that's the problem with it? And today we're going to experience it more,
Well,
now it's the Islamic thing,
Yeah. I think when I was over in China, let me tell you, I saw a lot of Greeks doing trade in Shanghai at the airport. 30, 40 Greeks in groups of 5, 6, all over there. When I spoke to them, I actually come up and spoke to them because I heard them speak Greek. And they were from Greece, there to do trade, there to do business. So it's not really a problem. It's not. I think you'll find that maybe the older generation say po, ikinesi, and maybe it's the numbers numerically. They must, maybe it's the issue of numbers that they're afraid of. I don't know. It's a number. 1.3 billion people is something that, But I think it's also the fact that they are pretty hard to do business with, and you just can't put it over them. When it comes to money, it's difficult. And as far as fear and what have you, with the Muslims, you see, it's the same with the Muslims. And that's a religious thing, I misi Christiani i Muslims, It's the way of the world, there's differences. homogenic societies like China and Greece, where, for long, in the minds of the people that are the older generation here, Greeks were Greeks back then. They were mostly Orthodox Christians. Things have changed even there. I heard one of your ex-ministers, one of the Greek ex-ministers for Foreign Affairs that was speaking at the Lenny Club a few months ago, where he was saying that the composition of the population in Greece is changing rapidly. Something like in 1970 or 80 or something, there was 200,000 births, Greek kids were born. Today it's 80,000. The Albanian mix coming down. These demographics are changing. The world is changing. When you hear Popo Kinesis or Popo Islamic, what you're hearing is something from a different era. Because we're such a multicultural society here in Canberra, it's not unusual to be working side by side. I've got a Greek who's my secretary. I have an administrative assistant who is Islamic. I have a Chinese lady, a South American lady, an English lady. I mean, we're United Nations here, to work side by side, to have your shop assistants that come in that are from different cultures. It's nothing unusual today.
It's exciting about Australia, isn't it?
It is exciting. It is.
It's the future. You positive about it? You confident about it?
Oh, I certainly am. Yeah, I am. I think our society and our community is very well, particularly here in Canberra, very well educated. We're at the forefront of a lot of research. We have a good family structure. When I say good family structures, we have in the multicultural community, we don't have the family problems that are evident elsewhere in Australia. I think we do have divorce rates that are a little bit higher than average and all the rest of it, but I think as a community we don't see the upheaval. On an individual basis, of course, these things happen, but as a community, I think the community is very healthy, very healthy. I think it augurs well. We have very strong leadership in our communities. The whole 860 of those community groups are served by voluntary. They get a bit of support from us financially, but very strong leadership and very driven leadership. And when there's problems, they rally around their own. And others, I might add. I mean, you saw the rally here in support of the Muslims in our town. That was the rally yesterday. Hundreds of people turned up. And they weren't just Muslims, they were from all. And that's the sort of thing that augurs well for our community, for a peaceful, progressive existence.
Concord, we did have some apprehensions at the beginning about the Greek community organisations and that. But I think this marriage of Hellenism and Australianism and United Nations-isms is going to take Hellenism where it's probably never been before.
Oh, well, I think because we have a lot to offer. I think we have a lot to offer. A lot to offer the world still today. Okay, some have argued that we've lost our way and all the rest of it, but look, there's been a time when the world, as they do here in Canberra, as a microcosm of what's happened in the world. In Canberra, they look up to the Greeks as role models, okay, and are modelling certain things. So did the world look up to, and whether it was in the arts, the mathematics, classical arts, performing arts, all the rest of it, the Olympics. So we should be proud. We should be have our chin up, continue doing what we're doing, and all will fall in place, as they say. If Con's, did you say Con was saying that that he had some worries or something? Did you?
No, not con. But generally, the older generation are worried about it because they look at it as a fixed thing.
Yeah.
And not as an evolving thing.
Yeah.
And the marriage of it within and the influences of the local community, both Australian and United Nations, is going to transform it. And they're a bit afraid of that. Whereas I think
So yeah, but they're
it will
afraid.
grow and develop in ways
Yeah.
that will surprise the world.
Well, I mean, that's right. And you see, the older generation are have achieved a lot with their bare hands and sweat and blood. They've achieved a lot. And of course, they see the world one way, and they've contributed. The Greekness that they contributed, the characteristics that they contributed, is what made them great, I suppose, or what others have copied. What's happening though, their kids or the next generation are being influenced by other things. But that doesn't mean that the Greekness or the things that they did are being watered down. I think what's happening is it's been added to. I see it with a lot of the Greek people that work here in this building, where they approach problems or they approach things in a Greek way, but they're more sensitive. Or they do it in a way that it's not like a truckload of elephants escaping down the main street of a shopping mall. You know what I mean? It's done in a way where they don't cause the problems or the angst because they are tiptoeing around, and that's what they've learned to do, being in this community, and that's how things are done, rather than we've got nothing to lose, we've got no money, we've got nothing, let's go. Let's, do it this way, and we take a risk and off we go. So I think the Greekness will still be there, because that's part of us. That's in us. That's the way we think. It's the way we think. I've employed this here where I've been. I think a lot of, I've been here 15 years in this job, and we've changed 4 governments, different colours. And I think one of my characteristics of entrepreneurial, delivering, always being at the point of delivering. I think that's very Greek. It's actually delivering the goods and making sure that what the customer wants. Now, the customer doesn't have to be one for sandwiches over the counter. It can be the Chief Minister, it can be the community, it can be other agencies that we work with, but always delivering. Now, that's a great, but I've tempered that. I haven't just closed my eyes and just, you know what I mean? So as a new generation, one of the, I guess, younger ones compared to the people that you're talking about, I think I've tempered that. But at the core still is the desire to deliver. It only gets better. It gets better. I think Hellenism will live. The spirit of Hellenism and the spirit of Greekness will live. But it'll be improved for this environment.
More adaptive.
Adapted.
More contributing in ways that it's not done in isolation.
No.
So will inspire, maybe.
Yeah. But the old generation had to do it in isolation because they didn't speak English. When they ran their cafes, they had to do it their way because they didn't have the interaction on a social level or on a day-to-day level that would shape them or shape their Hellenism back then. But it's happening now to this generation because our friends are Anglo-Saxon background or Chinese or whatever. We're meeting more people from different cultures on our day-to-day interactions. But that doesn't mean we're going to lose. I totally reject any concern.
Well, that say you're losing Greek, you know, or the church is not going to be so popular.
Two different issues. Two different issues. The church is not so popular. Well, one would have to look at the reasons for that. And sometimes the reasons are manyfold.